Good evening. This meeting is open to the public and is available through an online platform. Please subscribe to the Township of Wilmot YouTube channel to watch the live stream or view after the meeting. Delegations must register with the Information Legislative Services Department. The only matters being discussed at this meeting will be those on the agenda. We need a motion recommendation that council reconvenes in open session at 7 o'clock. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, seconded by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Good evening and thank you for joining us today. December 6th is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. 32 years ago today, 14 young women were murdered at Polytechnique in Montreal in a senseless act of gender-based violence. We must take action and work together to prevent these acts of violence towards women. Please join me in taking a moment to honor their lives and all women that have been victims of gender-based violence. Thank you. Councillor Fenning, can you read the territorial acknowledgement, please? You're muted, Councillor.
My apologies. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. A recommendation that the agenda as presented for December 6, 2021 be adopted. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, second by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. So next item is the minutes of previous meetings. A recommendation that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as presented. Regular council meeting, November 22nd, 2021. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, seconded by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is a public meeting. This is a public meeting in respect of official plan amendment application 01/21 and zone change application 0821. We will hear all interested people who wish to speak on this matter. If the decision of council is appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, the tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal if you do not speak at the public meeting or make written submissions before the bylaw is passed. I now declare the public meeting open. Persons attending as delegations at this meeting are required to leave their names and addresses, which will become part of the public record and you are hereby advised that the information may be posted on the township's official website along with your email addresses if provided. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. This public meeting is in relation to official plan and zone change application for 66 Hink Street, the former Magnuson Furniture property. The development application proposes complete redevelopment of the site, removal of existing buildings, and development of a townhome development in the neighborhood of approximately 63 to 66 units. The proposed layout is conceptual in nature, and the developer is refining the plans, and ultimately the application proposes to facilitate redevelopment of the site with townhomes in the general nature that's shown on the plans. There were a number of comments received through circulation of the application. Those comments are noted in the report and included in the appendix when provided in writing. Ultimately, at this point, the intent is to hear any comments that are provided by the public, and at such time as we receive formal comments back on the review of the technical studies that have provided in support of the application, including functional servicing, traffic studies, and the like. Staff would then return to council with a detailed report and recommendation outlining the concerns that have been raised or comments and addressing them in as much as possible. I'll leave my comments at that and be here to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions of Mr. Martin? Okay. Councilor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Mr. Martin, just out of curiosity, I know that this is just for information purposes, but some of the concerns, or at least one of the major concerns, was traffic and the impact because of part of Waterloo Street was being closed off, access to Hink Street with the railroad tracks and moving the traffic further up. Will those be addressed? Those traffic concerns be addressed going forward? And is there anything in place to sort of address those, the increased traffic with this potential property rezoning?
Through Mayor Armstrong, the terms of reference was scoped for the traffic study to look at previous patterns of traffic on the site. Certainly this used to be heavily trafficked with trucks and vehicles for the former Magnuson site. Redevelopment obviously has seen a reduction in traffic, but historically that isn't the case for the site. So that one of the existing conditions or previous conditions is taken into account, as well as the function of intersections, Waterloo Street and other intersections where traffic would funnel to this area. So certainly, looking at previous conditions, current conditions, and proposed conditions, along with the intersections and their functions, is all within the scope of the traffic study that has been prepared and is currently being reviewed. So the details of the outcome of that review will be provided in a subsequent report.
Okay, thank you. No further questions? Before commencing with hearing from delegations, I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Delegations will be allotted 7 minutes to speak. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting counselors or staff, derogatory statements about counselors, staff, or others, hate speech or defamatory comments. I will now call upon the delegations. The first delegation is Kevin Muir and Zach Zaire. Welcome, Kevin and Zach.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
On my side, it shows that I've been unmuted, but I can't turn on my camera for some reason.
Same for me.
Okay. Well, you may begin with your presentation then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Kevin Muir. I'm with GSP Group, senior planner with GSP Group, and we are the agent and the applicant for the OPA and ZBA that's before you tonight. We technically the owner of the property is Skyline Commercial Real Estate Holdings. They are currently working with Zare Group as we'll call the development proponent. So Zach Zare is with me tonight. He's vice president with Zare Group to answer any questions you may have. Not much in terms of the, I think the plan is relatively straightforward as presented by Mr. Martin. It is a mixed townhouse development. It is being planned as a condominium development with internal private roads. In terms of the concept itself, there's two types of townhouses that are proposed on the concept. So the green, if you're looking at your site plan, site concept, the green ones facing Hinks are a 3-story cluster townhouse. Those have rear access garages, and then lining Catherine Street and the remainder of the site in sort of the, we'll call it teal, are back-to-back townhouses. And so going through our exercise with Zare Group, looking at this site, looking at the context of it, we felt it was an appropriate development form for this property. And in our mind, it really checks a number of boxes in terms of, the planning framework. Number one is really the sort of the addition of the variety of community housing options. We see this as kind of a step in the housing spectrum, somewhere between, your standard townhouse, moving up to something a little more intense with a stacked townhouse. We think it fits nicely in the middle of that to provide options to the community. We do see it as a good fit with the existing low-rise residential neighborhood, and we've got a fairly varied context surrounding the site. We've 3-story apartments to the north of the property. We've got 2-story singles and semis to the east, singles 2 stories to the west, and then we've got a mix of singles and semis to the south. So we think it's a good fit with there in terms of height-wise. And third is we really see this as a continuation of the sort of the residential streetscape, which is missing right now with obviously the industrial and / commercial property. So we've done a very focused job of trying to get residential face along both of those streets, and you'll see that in the concept plan. As Mr. Martin had indicated, this is a work in progress, this concept. So obviously it was submitted for an OPA ZBA stage. It's in the process of always being refined and tweaked, adjusted based on some of the market conditions they're seeing in terms of unit design and obviously what we hear tonight. So just to put that in your ear as well. And then the applications themselves, I think they're fairly straightforward. The OPA is simply just to get it into that urban residential designation similar to the surrounding neighborhood. And the zoning bylaw amendment is relatively minor in terms of the site-specific requests that we're looking at. One is the increase in density, and that's really to reflect the sort of the nature of the back-to-back townhouse forms that the R4A zone doesn't accommodate very well in that sense. And then the front and rear yard setbacks, we're caught in a situation where we have a property that has essentially 2 fronts. So it has a front along Hinks and a front along Catherine. So we're reflecting that, as well as allowing the sort of the living portion, I will call it, of the homes to actually come closer to both of those streets. So that's the request for the reduction in the setbacks. The garages are actually on the back-to-back townhouses. They're sort of inset into the building, so they sit further back. Whereas on the Hinks side, they're actually in the back, so there's no interface in that sense. And I think the last two on the zoning really to stress is we're not looking at any no changes to the maximum permitted height. So we're sticking with the 10.5 meters, and that's a maximum height that's consistent across the township in terms of singles and semis. So there's no difference in that. And then the parking as well, we're playing within the existing minimum parking requirements. So there's no change sought there. So that is, I think that's in a nutshell, the sort of the development proposal. And we're certainly here to answer any questions you may have.
Councillor Gordick?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm not sure if Mr. Muir or Mr. Zaire. I have two questions, and one would be, will there be any accessibility units within this property? And secondly, is there any, being that they're going to be condominiums, and our township is committed to 50 by 30, is there plans to do any sort of net zero ready units within this as you're going forward, or any use of recyclable materials when you're going to build that? Is that part of your plan?
I could probably answer it simple and saying I don't, on either of the questions, I would say we're not at that point yet in terms of detailed design. Zach, I'm not sure if there's anything else you could add on that.
Yeah, I would agree, Kevin. This is, in some ways, still the early days in this project. We're obviously fully committed to what's going on in terms of the environment and playing our part to participate in trying to do our best to salvage and participate in what we're seeing. So I would agree, early days, but we're certainly committed to looking at these buildings and building them the best way possible. We're actively involved in projects in downtown Kitchener and throughout the region and of Waterloo, and completing a LEED Gold office building downtown Kitchener right now. So we're more and more familiar with that approach. And I think at the end of the day, as we advance this further, we'll certainly be looking into both of those.
And then just the second question with regards to accessibility, will you have any units that would be gearing towards having people with accessibility issues?
I believe so. I believe the code dictates that in some capacity. This is their group's first sort of residential built form such as this. We're historically done more mid-rise and high-rises. So I know definitively in that situation there's code requirements, but we'll obviously certainly be following any code rules. And if there isn't specific talk to that for these types of units, we would certainly look into that.
Thank you. Councillor Fanning?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Couple of questions. I know that on the existing Magnuson building, there's a significant amount of photovoltaic. Just wondering if there's been any consideration of moving that or incorporation of that particular aspect in the new construction?
So I can answer that. To the best of my knowledge, Skyline is taking those and relocating them to one of their other properties.
So another question, I'm sure you've heard a lot about traffic, and we all have. When I'm looking at the site plan the way it exists, I'm wondering what mitigation methods you're contemplating for reducing the desirability of using that central corridor as a pass through between Hinks and Catherine.
I would probably say at this point it's that was on our radar as well as we went through the design exercise. This obviously lays out very efficiently. As we go through this exercise, that's certainly stays on our radar, I think. And I think that's been raised obviously with some of the community comments. And we certainly don't want this to be especially from a condominium perspective, certainly don't want this to be a sort of a cut through route between Hinks and Catherine. But that's something we'll be looking at as we sort of go through and refine the plan as we get to a more detailed design.
Sounds good. Finally, from the perspective of the community around, they're concerned about what they're looking at. I'm wondering if you, and obviously, you've talked about that this is early days and the full project hasn't been refined and decided on as far as details, but I'm wondering if you can talk to me about vision for what you think people are going to be looking at when they look out their windows towards this property. What would the average resident that's neighboring this property see when they're looking here?
If you could clarify in terms of what do you mean by what they see? I know we've at this point, it's obviously early days, but we've done preliminary building elevations. So they form part of the package. That was kind of a voluntary exercise on behalf of Zara Group. We realize obviously people are going to wonder what these things look like, but I'm not sure if there's anything more specific you were thinking of, Councillor.
Well, just, and maybe this isn't something you can answer right now, so fair if that's the case, but landscape, say I'm in one of the Hinks Street apartment buildings facing this property, and I look out my window. What am I going to see? Am I going to be looking at a brick wall that's pretty close to my window? Am I going to be looking at a tree? What's, what can I expect from that?
So I'm happy to sort of jump in. So we've what we're going for is what I guess they're calling modern Scandinavian design. The buildings that are we certainly want them to fit within the neighborhood, but also be, impressive to look at when you drive by, obviously building to the community here. Our overall lot coverage is around 36%. In our opinion, leaving a lot of room to do a lot of that landscaping. Even when you look at in terms of the building elevations, lots of windows. As we've seen with COVID, the ability for people to be working from home in some sort of permanent basis going forward is probably the new normal. So when we design our buildings, both at this scale and at a larger scale, like in terms of height, try to accommodate that future need where someone could easily be working from home 2 days a week, 3 days a week as they sort of hotel in and out of the office. So we want to create, big, bright, open spaces that, people can be proud to have their home and want to be there for long periods of time. So as a result of that, I think our elevations reflect that, sort of a modern design, but also one that sort of establishes and appreciates the surrounding neighborhood. And then two, big, bright and open, bringing lots of natural light into the space as like I said, we're of the belief that we'll be seeing more people work from home on a weekly basis going forward.
Thank you. Realized that was a bit of a hard question to answer at this point.
Yeah, no problem. You're very welcome.
Okay, I see no further questions at the moment. So our next delegation is Mike Lucas. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong and councillors.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm just basically going to reiterate the email that I had sent everyone just about the intrusiveness of their roadway that's actually going to intersect our backyard. I find that that's going to be like extremely intrusive compared to the privacy backyard that we have, as well as a couple yards up from us as well too. The other thing I would like, if they do get the zoning change, even if they could propose a 2-story to fit better and respect the existing neighborhood closer to the single stories. I have had dealings with Skyline when they were redoing their storm drain. And after going through 3 managers, I seem to have got lost in the shuffle as well. And they didn't finish up with their deal of fixing the landscaping of my yard. So I'm not fond of them. And as for the traffic study, I'm not sure that when you're doing a traffic study in COVID, when the majority of people are working from home, that it's really that accurate either. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, if you're done, then Mike, we'll see if anyone has any questions for you.
Okay.
And there are no questions, so thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Our next delegation is Chris and Emily Wilkinson. Miss Murray?
It looks as though Emily and Chris are no longer waiting.
Okay. So I can ask if there are any other persons who wish to address council on this matter. Second time, anyone wishing to address council on this matter? And for a final time, is there anyone wishing to address council on the matter? Seeing none, I hereby declare the public meeting closed. So the recommendation is that report DS 2021-032 be received for information. That is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is a presentation on the project Grand River. Mr. Kelly, you wish to introduce, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Purpose of the report this evening is to provide council and the community an update on the proposed merger between Kitchener Power Corp and Waterloo North Hydro Holding Corporation. Like to note that Wilmot Township will be the first of 5 municipalities bringing forward updates on Project Grand River, with the remaining councils set to receive reports throughout this week and next. Following approval of a memorandum of understanding back on October the 4th, public consultations were held to solicit feedback on the proposed merger. Public consultation, dubbed Connecting Local Power, was predominantly positive, and a fulsome report from National PR has been attached to this report for information purposes. As directed by council back on October 4th, staff are here this evening seeking authorization to proceed with the merger participation agreement and unanimous shareholders agreement. Late last week, boards of the respective utilities showed support for proceeding with the merger and recommended approval of the MPA and USA. Under the proposed merger, Wilmot Township would retain a 4.49% ownership of the merged entity. And from a shareholder perspective, the proposed merge co will provide additional dividends to the township, which will offset the funding requirements of the annual municipal operating budget. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Jerry Van Oudegem, CEO of Kitchener Wilmot Hydro, and Mr. Jim Phillips, Board Chair for Kitchener Power Corporation, who will provide a brief presentation. for council and attend to any inquiries the council may have regarding the proposed merger at this time.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Council, and thank you again for time on your agenda this evening. I believe this may be the 7th or 8th time in the last 2.5 years that we've come to discuss Project Grand River, and obviously it's fantastic to get to this stage. You did receive a letter that I sent through on December 3rd on behalf of KPC Board of Directors. Last Friday, our 3 boards, KPC, KWHI, and KESI, all unanimously approved moving forward with the merger and are recommending that to you this evening. So without further ado, I'll perhaps turn things over to Jerry, and he has a brief presentation for you.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Mayor Armstrong, members of council, senior staff, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to provide this update to you since our last meeting on October 4th. I'll begin with some background information on the next slide. So Kitchener Power Corp and Waterloo North Hydro Holding Corporation retained an independent advisor to evaluate the merger opportunity between the holdcos and the distribution companies, Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Waterloo North Hydro Inc. We evaluated the business case benefits of merging the 2 utilities and carefully took a look at the legal and financial issues of this potential merger. Independent legal advisors were retained by each of the organizations and completed their legal due diligence. And finally, peer reviews of the legal, the financial, and the technical aspects of this merger were conducted. Next slide, please. So on October 4th, Council gave direction to staff and the Board of Directors of Kitchener Power Corp to proceed with negotiating both the merger participation agreement and the unanimous shareholder agreement, and to also move forward with the public engagement process and report back to Council before the end of the year. The merger participation agreement and the unanimous shareholder agreement are now in final form, ready for consideration and approval by municipal councils. National PR was retained to work with Waterloo North Hydro Holdco and Kitchener Power Corp to complete the community engagement process. Next slide, please. So on October 1st, 2021, a public announcement of the proposed merger was made. The announcement launched the public engagement phase of this process following council approvals of the memorandum of understanding on October 4th and 5th. The objectives of the communications strategy and public engagement plan were to inform our customers, residents, and employees of the proposed merger, and to raise awareness and understanding of the rationale and the details and benefits of the merger. A communications campaign called Connecting Local Power was launched and included a microsite where residents could go to find out more information about the proposed merger and also to have their questions answered. Internally, we also set up a SharePoint site for our staff to view all of the latest information. Next slide, please. A virtual public information session was held on October 19th at 7:00 p.m. Residents who attended received an overview of the proposed merger and had their questions answered by a group of panelists. There were 23 people that registered for the public information session, including 17 residents. A steady flow of questions occurred during the 1-hour session, And questions focused on a number of topics, including rates, service impacts, investments in innovation and climate change in electric vehicles. Next slide, please. As of November 11th, there were over 3,800 visitors to the website. The highest number of users were from the municipalities that are listed on the slide, with Kitchener having the highest total. As of November 23rd, there were 16 inquiries from residents who had comments or questions about the merger. In addition, content was created for social media posts, and all 5 municipalities shared these media posts on their Twitter and Facebook pages. A communications package was also shared with municipal councils. As mentioned by Mr. Kelly, the proposed merger received mostly positive feedback from residents who asked questions and from the news media reports. Next steps, please. Next slide. So a little bit about next steps. So subject to all 5 councils approving the merger participation agreement, there's significant work to be done before closing this transaction. First, the merger participation agreement would need to be executed by all the parties, which would include the unanimous shareholders agreement as part of that document. Subject to approval from councils, we would then apply to the Ontario Energy Board for approval and to the Competition Bureau as well early in the new year. While awaiting the Ontario Energy Board approval, which could take up to 6 months, the parties will work on selecting the new board chair, and the CEO, as well as preparing to start the new company. A new name will be identified for approval. And the expectations are that the new company would start operations in Q3 of 2022. I just want to clarify that the shareholders agreement, although it would be part of the merger participation agreement, it would not be executed until after the OEB approves the merger deal and just prior to closing the transaction. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, significant effort and discussions have occurred amongst the parties to develop this final version of the MPA in the USA. Both documents meet the terms set out in the Memorandum of Understanding that Council approved on October 4th and represent a fair and reasonable approach to this merger going forward. The community engagement website will remain live until the end of March 2022, and we will continue to monitor it for any further questions that we receive through the website or through social media. In summary, we have met all the conditions that were stipulated from the councils to proceed with the merger. Next slide. So the recommendation this evening to council is that, having reviewed and thoroughly discussed the documents, the merger participation agreement, the unanimous shareholders agreement, and the public engagement report, the Board of Kitchener Power Corp unanimously recommends to each of the councils that council authorize Kitchener Power Corp, Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro Inc., and Kitchener Energy Services to enter into the merger participation agreement, and that each municipality do the same. So that's the end of my presentation, and Jim and I are certainly available to answer any questions.
So we're looking for some hard-hitting questions Councillor Gordick.
Thank you for the presentation. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm just curious as to, we don't need maybe specifics for the individuals, but you said there were some negative comments. What would they have been alluding to from the residents that asked those negative questions?
Well, probably the most common question that we heard was around the difference in rates between the two utilities. And that was expected, certainly. In the proposed merger, we've addressed that to make sure that Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro customers would not be harmed as a result of the difference in rates. So we've proposed to have harmonized rates over a 20-year period. So that would mean that we would maintain separate distribution rate zones for each of the Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro customers and Waterloo North Hydro customers until they are gradually harmonized over that 20-year period. So residents would be no worse off than if the merger never happened.
Thank you.
Well, I see no other questions, so thank you, gentlemen. There is a recommendation before you, and it is rather lengthy. And we will have that. And we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Moved by Councillor Fanning, seconded by Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you again, gentlemen, for visiting with us and staying up late. So, sorta.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. It's a job well done by everybody. Thank you. So, next item we have is the shop local bingo. And we have a delegation with that. And Mr. Okrafka, do you wish to introduce the delegation?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Mayor Roth. Or Mayor Roth. I'm in the wrong generation. Mayor Armstrong, my apologies.
You will catch up. You will catch up, I'm sure.
It's been a long day. Very happy to introduce Lillian Dunstall and Steph Gertz, local residents who are doing a great job with Shop Local Bingo initiative that they created and have advanced, and the township is happy to be a participant in that process. And without further ado, I will turn it over to the delegation to describe the bingo program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council. We'd like to thank you for allowing us this opportunity to share an important and community engaging event. It all started a few weeks ago, not that many weeks ago. I met Stephanie Gertz for the very first time, and we seemed to have a lot in common. So that went well. On November 3rd, I received a Facebook text from Stephanie that said, would you be interested in helping with the local businesses over the holiday season? And I quickly responded, yes, I would. Well, what do you have in mind? And she quickly responded, I have no clue. That's where we started. So we decided we needed to strategize and we needed to come up with an objective. And can you change the slide, please? So what are we going to do? Well, we wanted to find a way to create excitement and community engagement. And we also wanted to make sure that we were promoting our local businesses at the same time. And we have some amazing local businesses. So what we decided to do was gamify. We needed to come up with something that people could do with their friends, their family, their kids, get outside, enjoy the weather, enjoy their community, and engage with the local businesses. And so we came up with Shop Local Wilmot Bingo. Next slide, please. Stephanie?
Yes.
So we jumped in and we recognize that businesses right now, as they're struggling with COVID and the pandemic, getting people to their stores has been hard. Like Lillian was saying earlier, we had an interview with Mike Farwell earlier today, and we're talking about the need for people to get out of their house and the need for people to like explore their community and do things they wouldn't normally do because we've been so stuck in our own routines the last 2 years. We really wanted to use this not only as an opportunity to help and support businesses, but also help and support the residents to get out and build a sense of community and belonging. So we had our, we have the bingo cards. It's, you know, it's fun, it's entertaining, but it's also an opportunity for my two kids are at the bottom there. And the one day they came home from school and I said, let's go out, let's play bingo. They had an absolute blast. They didn't want to come home. It was amazing because they haven't had the opportunity to go out and talk to people or be in the community and really get hands-on. You should have seen them exploring and touching all the different things in the stores and engaging with the sales clerk, asking them questions, and just, you know, it was a really fun opportunity for them to learn what it means to be in a small town and to support local. I each gave them a little bit of money each, and had their money and they were counting their coins. And so it was a great learning opportunity for them on how to budget because they wanted everything. Yeah, next slide, please. So how does it work? So the idea is that you go online to our new website, which Lillian started up last week. You should pat her on the back because this is the first time she's ever explored making her own website. This is all new to her. And this is great because I find working with Lillian, it's, you know, she's loving the opportunity of exploring new ideas and new ways of learning. And I've just kind of thrown her so many tasks, and she's just done so phenomenal with this. And so she started up the new website. You can go to shoplocalwilmot.com is the website. And on there, you can download the bingo card, or you can sign up for our registration. So you can get updates from us through Eventbrite. And the idea is that we have 4 different categories, or 4 rows by 4 columns. And then we have farm fresh, restaurants and beverages, services, home and garden, but it says pharmacy, but we've included pharmacy, fitness and health in there. And the idea is that you can go into a local store and you can purchase an item. And if it's, say, the top row, you go to Fennings, or you go to Two Calf Standing, and then you go to restaurants and foods. You can go to Mimi's. Services, there is M&M services for car detailing, and then you can go to any business. So is this chair taken? So you can get all your stamps, and that will be 1 row, and you can get entered into one entry, or you can do 2 rows or 3 rows or all 4 rows. And you can get lots of entries, and the cash prize, or the prize, is $1,000. So Lillian will talk about that shortly. But we also understand that not everyone can buy things right now. Not everything, money can be tight for some people. So we've made sure we found stores that people can buy their everyday needs at, which is really extremely helpful right now. But also, you don't need to purchase anything. You can just go and explore businesses. So you'd fill a whole card just by simply walking in the door, getting a stamp, and that's the whole card. And then you can enter that as an entry. So you can still have a chance to win, even if you don't or can't spend money right now. Next slide.
This is me. We decided to pitch this to the New Hamburg Board of Trade and the Wilmot Township. And I have to tell you that they stepped up to the plate immediately. The Board of Trade offered $1,000 right off the bat, which I can't tell you how thrilled we were to get. And the township, they paid for the bingo cards, they paid for some ads, they arranged for the libraries to participate. The help that Harold Okrafka and his staff has given us has helped us every single step of the way, and I can't thank them enough. We also had 3 other businesses who wanted to give back to their community. Allen Beach Roofing, Dress to Deliver, and Premium Roofing all contributed money. So now we were looking at $2,000 prize money. And that's a lot of coin, I can tell you that. And we'd also like to give a shout out to the Baden Outlook, who gave us a very good pricing on an ad that we ran with them. So thank you. Next slide, please. As Stephanie mentioned, we were on the Mike Farwell show this morning, and if any of you had the opportunity to see it, Stephanie and I were outstanding, did an outstanding job, and representing our community and sharing all the information we had about the bingo. And he was extremely supportive. He loves shopping local. We end on December 25th. And the draw is going to be a public draw, and it's going to be Zoom Live. So it will be held at the Puttycombe Porch, I believe at around 2 o'clock, but we'll be publicizing that. The sponsors will be attending, as well as we would like to extend an invitation to council on December 30th to be there when they choose the 4 winners, one $1,000 prize, one $500 prize, and 2 $250 prizes. All of those are gift cards, and they must be spent at participating local businesses. So the money stays in Wilmot, which is great. Next slide, please. Some of the feedback that we've been getting, well, actually all the feedback we've been getting, it's been extremely positive. These are just a couple of the comments that people have made. One of the side benefits that I didn't really anticipate was the businesses networking with other businesses. So, you know, we had businesses find other local businesses and buy from them. So now you have a local business buying from a local business and creating more business. So that was a really nice benefit we saw. And if I had to sum it up in one word, the feedback that we've gotten from the residents as well as the businesses is gratitude. Gratitude for giving them something to go out and do and have fun with, and for the businesses, more foot traffic. And I can tell you by visiting most of these participating businesses, the gratitude, you can hear it in their voice and you can see it in their eyes. And that has been extremely fulfilling for us. And we do not believe that you can have a successful and prosperous community without having successful and prosperous businesses. Next slide, please.
So for our numbers, so this is exciting. We had very little time to actually be planning this. It was, I think, what was it, Lillian?
21 days
from idea.
Yep.
21 days, we're literally from the message on Facebook saying, do you want to support something local? Sure, let's figure this out, to when we actually launched. And that even had spent time of even spent figuring like 4 or 5 days to figure out what were we even actually doing. And Lillian's daughter stepped up and came up with the bingo card idea. And so when we launched on launch day on the 24th, we had almost 40 to 50 businesses right at the get-go. We had the $2,000 fundraised, and we had 2,300 people view our directory on that day, which is surprising because we only advertised on Facebook and on just emails and getting the word out. So 2,300 people viewing our page was phenomenal. As of yet, or as of right now, it's 7,100 views of the directory. So it's been about 2 weeks or so. We have around actually 101 people registered now on Eventbrite to receive emails from us and updates, and about 85 people interested on Facebook. And we're up to 82 businesses registered on our directory. And next slide. So I guess what we're doing for our ask for council is that just keep doing what you're doing. We love the support. Harold has been phenomenal with the support, and with we get emails from him, all the time, and it's the engagement we're getting, and we're hoping that feeds out into the other community and the other businesses as well. And we hope this builds an excitement to continue doing something like this in the future and exploring what this could look like for opportunities. And obviously we won't know how much positive this impact this has had until afterwards, when we can look through all the all the bingo cards and look through potential surveys out to businesses to see, how do they feel about this? How did this make them feel a part of this community? And how much business did they actually maybe increase over the next month after this bingo card's done? Because the people are going to hopefully keep going back to these businesses, and that's the goal. Next slide.
So we would like to thank you for your support. And I can tell you that this process that happened so quickly has been crazy. It has been hectic. It has been frustrating. And I have a lot more gray hairs on my head now than I did when we started this. But at the same time, it has been fulfilling. The sense of community with our families stepping up to help, with the township, with the businesses, has been truly inspiring. So thank you very much. And remember, love where you live and shop local. Thank you.
And I just want to jump in, sorry. You drop your bingo card off at the Region of Waterloo Libraries in Wilmot. So there's 3 of them. So they get dropped off. And on Christmas, obviously, there's a lot of things that we are learning along the way, but obviously they're not open on Christmas. So drop your bingo cards into the mailbox for the books return. Because yeah, that's a learning curve for next time. Don't close an event on Christmas. It doesn't make sense. Yeah, we just want to thank everyone. This has just been a great opportunity.
Thank you, ladies. We really appreciate that. And one thing I really appreciate is people coming here and letting staff know that I'm not the only one that think they're fabulous. So thank you. We appreciate you coming in and letting them know what a great job they do. And it's such a great opportunity for people to get out. Thank you for creating this. Now, are there any questions for the 2 ladies? Councilor Fisher.
Thank you, Lillian and Steph. Love the energy, love the organization. That's a lot of work in a short amount of time, so that's awesome. The one question I got, will Shop Local Santa be coming down from up north to help you with this promotion at all?
Shop Local Santa has been helping us. I can tell you that. You'd have to check with Harold. He has the key to Santa's agenda. So I'm not sure, but I can tell you that if the township is Santa, then he's been with us every step of the way.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you both so much for your work on this. As a small business owner myself, this time of year is very busy and can get very overwhelming. So I deeply appreciate you reaching out to other businesses. And as we all are scrambling to recover from our time off in COVID or lost sales, every little bit helps. So we appreciate when we find people in the community who have our backs to help regenerate those revenues. So I really appreciate that. And I've heard nothing but good things from all through Wilmot. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I see no further comments. Did you want to finish up with anything, Harold?
Just from a staff perspective, I want to thank Steph and Lillian again for their energy. Certainly, my opinion would be that these grassroots efforts give us the opportunity to collaborate and really show the spirit of small town living and a rural community. And I think we don't have a big budget and everybody's come together, and I think it's been very successful. And so I just wanted to, again, extend the staff appreciation to Lillian and Steph for all their efforts on this.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so there is a recommendation that report DS 2021-037 be received for information. That is moved by Councillor Gordick and Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you again, ladies, and keep up the good work. So the next item is the billboard sign renewals. Is Mr. Martin taking this? Welcome back, Andrew.
Thank you, Armstrong. I think the report is self-explanatory. It's an annual update on the billboards that are licensed in Wilmot, and everything appears to be in good order at this point. All fees have been collected and the signs are functioning as designed without issue to date. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions on that report? Seeing none. The recommendation that report number DS 2021-035 be approved. Moved by Councillor Fanning, Councillor Gerber, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. Next item comes from Development Services. The zone change application. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Armstrong. This application deals with zone change at 162 Snyder's Road East in Baden. The application was previously considered at a public meeting in May of this year. Since that time, the applicant has worked through some of the outstanding technical matters and has obtained comments from both the region and the Grand River Conservation Authority, indicating that the concerns that were raised and requirements of that time have all been addressed. Ultimately, the application is proposing a multi-unit apartment building on the property. The current zoning is Zone 5 commercial, and it allows for commercial uses as well as residential uses on upper levels of permitted commercial use. This application proposes to retain that commercial zoning to allow for potential flexible reuse of the main floor of the building, but proposes at this point to allow for residential units to be on the property without the presence of a commercial use. The application also deals with site-specific amendments dealing with the required parking ratio for apartment units, as well as setbacks from both street lines. There were a number of comments that received at the public meeting and subsequent to the public meeting, and those are highlighted within the report. The report then basically highlights the overarching concerns in several paragraphs, and I'll go through each of those briefly. Firstly, dealing with both the height and location of the proposed building. Some concerns were raised regarding the size of the structure and the height and location that's being proposed. The structure is proposed to be 3 stories or 11 meters in height. The maximum height in a commercial zone allows for the 3-story structure. In a typical residential zone, the height is referred to in a measured distance of 10.5 meters. So essentially, we're dealing with a structure that's comparable in a residential zone, but is also permitted as is proposed within that commercial zone. So the height is not changing from what could otherwise already be built on this property. The other unique part is dealing with the orientation of this property. It was previously 2 separate properties, and if those were developed as separate properties, the side yard setback on the, I'll say right side of the property would be a less requirement than what exists, so based on this proposal. However, the property being merged together, the front of the property faces Brubaker Street, and what would be the right side if they were 2 separate properties becomes a rear yard. It's a little bit confusing, but essentially the reduction deals with a rear yard setback, but essentially functions as a side yard. So it's not a substantial reduction for what otherwise would normally be able to be developed on the property, and just deals with the technical orientation of the site more than the function. And then the last part dealing with the setbacks is the setback reduction from Snyder's Road. So the proposal would bring the building closer to Snyder's Road, bringing the kind of habitable portion closer to the street, keeping the parking in behind, which is, typically a positive urban design function. And the other benefit is it keeps the building closer to the road and less within what would be the rear yard of the abutting residential unit. So essentially, by bringing the property closer to the road, the building kind of stays within the side and front yard, and it isn't pushing back into the rear yard of the adjacent residential use. So from that perspective, the location would appear to be appropriate and compatible from a township standpoint. Some concerns were raised regarding parking. The ratio is proposed to be reduced from a standard of 1.5 spaces to 1.2 spaces per unit. This reduction is something that we're going to see more commonly within proposed intensification projects. Essentially, in order to get the number of units on a property that potentially provides opportunity to reduce the cost and increase affordability, in order to get that number of units, there is going to be changes to standards to see that be possible. So in this case, the parking reduction is one way that they're able to increase the buildable area and intensify the number of units. And from a township standpoint, staff perspective rather, we feel that this is an appropriate location to consider that. The property is on a regional road serviced by the existing Route 77 GRT route, which recently council adopted, or rather approved increases to the budget allocations to accommodate an additional bus on that route and increase frequency. So the transit opportunities are available to the site and will continue to be available in the future, as well as infrastructure, sidewalks and bike lanes that are being constructed as part of the Snyder's Road reconstruction project. So we would recognize that right now, we can't say that developments are fully transit serviced. However, there is continuing opportunities to improve transit in our communities, and certainly being located on a major road such as Snyder's, a collector road with infrastructure for both transit and active transportation is something that is appropriate to consider these sorts of redevelopment projects. And then the next component just is dealing with final implementation of the development, to look at concerns dealing with visibility, snow storage, lock grading and drainage, and the like. And those are all matters that we deal with through site plan control. So certainly fencing in parking areas to limit impacts from vehicle lights and to improve privacy, exterior lighting on buildings to ensure that lighting isn't directed to neighboring properties, landscaping, stormwater management, lock grading, and drainage are all matters that are dealt with through a standard site plan control process, and certainly that wouldn't be any different with this. So concerns that have been noted in the comments from the public certainly form part of a standard process, but certainly will also be further looked at to ensure that the development is compatible through site plan design. And the last comment that was provided and summarized in the report is just dealing with outdoor amenity areas and access to recreation opportunities. And ultimately, different housing forms provide different ranges of amenity areas, and certainly intensification on a property may not lend itself towards the same amenities that you'd find in a single detached dwelling. However, in this case, this property is located in close proximity to Surrounding Beck Park, providing open space and multiple recreational opportunities, and being located on Route 77 has direct access also to the Wilmot Recreation Complex to offset any kind of perceived lack of amenity areas, certainly for those looking for outdoor space and areas to enjoy outdoor recreation. The township properties serve that function. And certainly that is something, again, that we would see through a lot of these redevelopment projects with forms of housing that we haven't more commonly seen in Wilmot. Some of those perceptions of outdoor amenity areas will change. But that is a function of our Parks, Facilities and Recreation Master Plan to ensure that we have those opportunities available to everyone. So I'll leave my comments at that and certainly can answer any further questions that you may have.
Councillor Gorick.
Sorry, through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Mr. Andrew. And I don't know if you can answer this because I don't know if it's part of the concept drawing. But just me looking at it with, I'm trying to figure out where the front of the building would be. I know that, I'm assuming that the sort of dotted lines would be the front door access, I'm assuming, on the Schneider's Road component of the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you, through Mayor Armstrong, there is a main entrance or sidewalk coming from Snyder's Road to kind of the lobby area of the building.
Yeah.
And that would be, I guess, the front of the building. And then obviously there's access to those units from the back, from the parking area as well.
So there, because I'm just trying to look at that. So that was my question is like, do we use GRAC with regards to these kind of buildings? Because I noticed that the 2 accessible parking spots, that seems to be a bit of a walk, I guess, to the front door access. So I couldn't see on the actual building drawing where those accesses would be. And just wondering about if GRAC has had a look at those with regards to accessibility issues.
Through Mayor Armstrong, so certainly accessibility is something that's looked at through the building code review and site plan review process. But on this design, those 2 accessible parking spaces are directly in front of a ramp that leads you to the accessible entrance of the building. So in this case, the accessible entrance is actually from the parking area and at the back, not from the street facing entrance. Certainly that could change through the detailed design, but that's what the current design would suggest.
So just to follow up then through Mayor Armstrong, so I understand that there's planning that is worked through, but because we are part of the Grand River Accessibility Committee, do we get those, does that committee get involved with some of the planning discussions with regards to accessibility? Just kind of going forward is my own sort of question.
Through Mayor Armstrong, through the site plan control process, we typically do not involve GRAC because the accessibility components are already regulated through the Ontario Building Code. So our internal review and building involvement in that process ensures that accessibility provisions that are required by the building code are built in, and then certainly site plan standards to ensure that the design coincides with building code requirements is something that's looked at already. So to those accessibility pieces are certainly looked at through our current internal process, but we don't involve GRAC at this point in the site plan control steps.
Comment.
You were muted, sir, but thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just for council and the public's benefit, with regards to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee and Accessibility Advisory Committees just in general, they only comment on municipal projects. They do not comment on the public. It is for, at this point, those sorts of committees are only for municipal projects. So,
Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I notice on the diagram there that the side setback is 15.1 feet from the building to the property line. How close would the parking lot go to the property line? It looks like it extends a little further there.
Through Mayor Armstrong, so the minimum distance that it would need to be is 0.6 meters. So 2 feet from the property line is the zoning requirement for hard surfacing and curbing. So I would expect the traffic movement, the bump out in that parking lot is fairly close to that 0.6 meters would be my expectation.
Okay. And secondly, is there a simple formula for setbacks? Like, I know each application probably has a different way to figure it out. Is there something that you use a formula?
Go ahead, Mr. Martin. I don't think there's any such thing these days as a simple formula.
No.
So the zoning bylaw includes standards in different zones, and typically those standards we're looking at the ability to provide adequate setbacks, dealing with to ensure room for lot grading and drainage within side yard swales, those kind of, and providing room for, in a residential zone, providing room for the air conditioning units and things like that within side yards. So typically that's what setbacks are in place for. There isn't a formula that prescribes, a setback will be this based on this use. It's set out in each of those zones. And so then, ultimately the opportunity exists through either the zoning process or a minor variance process to review those setbacks on a case-by-case basis based on the proposal and the ability to, ensure compatibility of the design.
Okay, I see no further questions at this point. So we have some registered delegations, and we remind the delegations that everything I said earlier about delegations still apply. So first delegation is Andrea Sinclair. Welcome, Andrea.
Good evening, Mayor Armstrong, Council, and those members of the public watching at home. Always that moment of panic when you see the spinning wheel and you're hoping you do get brought into the meeting and not kicked out. So thank you, Mr. Martin, for that comprehensive overview. I'm here in support of the development and in full support of staff's recommendation. There are a few just overview comments I wanted to provide, as well as some additional details. So I think, as everyone who's in the media these days knows, Ontario as a whole, and I don't think any municipality is exempt from this, is facing a housing affordability crisis. It's probably the #1 topic in the media these days. So this is a development that is in the urban core area, which is a place where intensification is in the policies supported to occur, and importantly, also a purpose-built rental in a market where your vacancy rates are lower than what's considered healthy. So some of the merits of this project is obviously the provision of a more affordable form of housing in an area where there is a need for rental. It's also a brownfield site, so there was contamination on this property, as many members of council may be aware, from previous uses. So our clients have been actively cleaning up the site and will be fully remediating the site prior to any building permit issuance. That's something at sort of provincial, regional, and local level that is encouraged, that brownfield sites be cleaned up and redeveloped. It's there will be, as mentioned previously, there will be accessible units, and I can just comment on the previous comment about the accessible spaces. That is still the intended design. There is accessible sidewalk and rear entrance close to those spaces. That's still in the current site plan design. There will also be a number of fully accessible units, as well as elevators throughout the entire building to ensure even the lower level units have access by stairs or elevator. While it's not necessarily the level of detail we get into at a zone change, I thought it was worth sharing that the efficiency cooling and heating system that's proposed for this building is a system that's pretty much the highest efficiency you can get. It does not use gas, so as a result, this building will have no greenhouse gas emissions. It's a totally different system design, very sustainable elements. That's often the case when you're dealing with purpose-built rental, because my clients, this will be a long-term hold. They aren't selling units and then leaving the project. When you want a long-term rental to work, you often exceed all those efficiency requirements because you want to ultimately have a project that's cost-effective to run over the long term. So there's a lot of other really phenomenal, sustainable elements that will be incorporated within this building, as well as low-impact design in terms of stormwater management and a number of other factors. As Mr. Martin mentioned, we've satisfied the region GRCA and local departments in terms of any of their comments on this zone change. There's also a number of comments that we heard at the statutory public meeting that I just want to touch on briefly. Mr. Martin already talked about concerns that were raised about amenity. I did want to mention that in addition to the balconies and sort of ground level landscaping, there is a rooftop patio proposed. It's located, if you were to picture sort of the intersection of Brubaker and Snyder's, it's more at that side of the building, so further away from the abutting residential lot. And that rooftop amenity will have privacy screens as well, so people on the rooftop won't be able to see over into the backyard to the east, but it's certainly at the western edge. So that provides some additional amenity for the future residents. There were questions about fencing and the comment about the parking setback and the setback to the parking field. There will be a board-on-board privacy fence, so that will ensure that any headlights or things like that cannot shine into abutting properties. So that board fence will be extended along the entire northern and eastern property lines as part of this development. In terms of concerns about overlook onto properties, and Mr. Martin mentioned the way this building's been situated, it's hard without a visual in front of me, but is so that the building doesn't go past the rear of the building to the east. So the balconies, there's one set of units with balconies on each level on the eastern edge of the building. But the way those are positioned, that the lowest level, it will basically face the privacy fence. On the upper levels, they'll really be looking on the roof of that adjacent development as opposed to looking out over their backyard. And overall, the building's been designed with a number of projections so that there's solid walls coming out of the side of the balconies that also mean people don't have direct view lines into surrounding backyards. And at the rear of the building as well, the balconies are shifted more to the west. So there's no balconies right at that eastern kind of corner of the building where they would have the most potential to overlook into the abutting rear yard. So those have all been considered in the more detailed building design. And the other thing I wanted to mention is in response to concerns we heard at the statutory public meeting, the landscape plans, which form part of the overall site plan application, were also updated to increase the amount of landscaping along the eastern edge of the development. With the reduced setback, there's still more than enough room to provide for some trees, shrubs and other things to provide kind of that additional level of privacy beyond just the fence. So I believe that's really all I want to say. Again, we're here in support, here to answer any questions, and believe this is a very positive development for Baden. There is a need for rental housing. This is within your urban core area, which is where this type of development is supposed to occur. We purposely made sure to build within the height limit that's already permitted and have made concessions so that over time, if there was a need to add a commercial unit, the heights allow for it. But at this in this location, we really felt that a standalone residential is the most appropriate. So thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andrea. We have a couple of questions for you. First is Councillor Holman.
Hi, Andrea, through the mayor. Thank you so much for answering all those questions. I greatly appreciated your summary, made lots of notes. So just wanted to give you feedback to say thank you for addressing everything in such great detail.
Thank you.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I want to echo the thanks for taking the time to provide us with a fuller picture of what's planned. It certainly helps us envision how this is going to impact the community, and I really appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that was talked about in the public meeting and staff have addressed it in the report as well, is that this is directly on a bus route, and while Route 77 is not all we would like it to be, we do see improvements coming this fall, in the coming fall, and I expect that there will be more improvements to come, and I see it as a very positive thing to have increased potential ridership right there.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions. Thank you, Andrea. Our next delegation is Jen Zielman. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thank you.
Okay, you have 7 minutes.
Okay, so I'm here again to address my concerns regarding the development application. I'm the resident directly beside the building to the east there. That's our house. So my biggest concern is the size of the building that they are trying to fit on to the site. From listening to the others speak about it, it is partially due to the orientation and putting the two sites together. I understand that. But it just tells me that they need the reduced setbacks and the reduced parking because they're trying to put a building that's too big for the site there. If they put a smaller building with less units, they wouldn't need to be asking for the reduced setback and the reduction in the parking spaces, and it might even allow for some visitor parking. We don't have a lot of street parking in the area, and with the changes to parking on Snyder's Road with the reconstruction, we're losing more of our street parking. So I have concerns about that. I do understand that it is a priority to put in more housing in the entire region, not just here, but that can still be accomplished without putting in 32 units. You can still achieve putting in more residents. There's nothing there now at 20 units or something, and if they reduce the size, it might solve a lot of the other issues and amendments that they're asking for. And then I just like you to consider the precedent that is being set for future development in the area and applications. If the regulations are there, but developers aren't being made to follow them, then if they're pushing them a little bit this time, what happens next time they want to develop? Will they try to push those regulations and the distances and the heights they're asking for a little bit further? And it's still, thank them for considering the privacy fencing and the location of the building on the property to try and minimize the disturbance to our privacy and in our backyard. But there's still going to be a huge building beside us. And that with balconies, although they won't have a full visual, there still will be overlooking our backyard, our side deck. And I'd like to ask, there are 2 large trees that do provide on the side of the property right there, provide a fair amount of privacy and would continue to do so. I can't tell from any of the site plans whether the 2 large trees will be staying. I'd like to make an ask that they do. I think it not only provides privacy for us, but it also goes with the programs and that of Let's Tree Wilmot and planting all the trees. We've already lost a lot of trees in the area along the boulevard. They've cut down all the trees along there because of the reconstruction of Snyder's Road. So this is cutting down more trees in the area. And yeah, so I would just like you to consider, yes, there's benefits to building a high density housing apartment building in that spot, but it's also negatively affecting the residents in the area. It doesn't match anything that is around. A number of the residents have voiced their concerns about it and the look of the building and how close it is to the street. The added traffic in the area. We're not only getting this apartment building, but they're also adding in more townhouses further back on Brubaker Street. So it'll be a lot of traffic being added into a small area. I think that pretty much covers it. Sorry about the monkey that's been playing on my lap.
Don't have to apologize for little ones at all, ever.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you through the mayor. My question isn't so much for Jen, but thank you for your delegation, Jen. Is if staff can comment on because I'm just looking at that as well about the tree. And then also if you can, if the tree is being, or trees are being removed, if that's the plan, can staff comment on what the replacement policy is? Because I believe it's a 2-to-1 ratio. Yeah, if someone can jump on and let me know.
Theo Armstrong, I don't know based on the final site plan at this point whether those trees are being retained or not. I'd have to look at that. Perhaps the consultant Andrea might know the answer offhand if she's added back to the meeting. So that may be a question for her. Certainly something we can look at, and if possible to be retained. There isn't a specific policy for 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio for replacements, but we certainly do encourage and promote through our site plan control process having as many trees as possible on a site. And certainly if there are existing trees being removed, we would be looking for them to compensate that through plantings on the site. But again, that detailed site plan control process will kind of feed in those comments into. I can get back to you with the answer on the tree removal. I just don't know off the top of my head at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm just like to echo those comments. I like the idea of trying to keep the trees natural privacy. It certainly would help there if he could.
Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. We're all about the trees. You talk about trees and we all get excited apparently. So I just looked it up on the street view. It looks like they're Norway spruce. Would that be correct?
Sorry, I don't know offhand, but perhaps Jen knows.
I don't know exactly what kind of trees they are. Norway spruce would be something that they'd be similar to.
Well, I have Norway spruce in my yard, and so they're looking very similar. I'm just I'm wondering what the age of them would be, and yeah, obviously, support trying to keep mature trees as much as possible. But I know that the condition and age of them will also sometimes, especially with the Norway spruce around here, a lot of them are at an age where they're starting to have problems. So if they do have to come down, hopefully they can plant something really good in place of them.
See, Andrea's back. Andrea, would you like to respond? Then we'll go to Councillor Fisher.
Sure, thank you. I've had my team sort of frantically in the background trying to just pull up the details, but I know that we do make all efforts to retain mature trees where possible. I don't unfortunately have the detailed site plan, tree replacement plans in front of me. However, I do know there are definitely new trees proposed along that stretch, and like I said, I believe all efforts to retain healthy mature trees we always try to do, especially in this case where we aren't into digging foundations or underground parking, which makes it easier. And there is a good comment on the health, though, is sometimes the trees are already at a health where they may not survive much longer, but all of that will be detailed through site plan, and all I can say is echo that we'll be trying our best to maintain as many of the mature trees as we can.
Yeah, that's something that you can take back for the site plan. That's great.
Absolutely.
I'll give Councillor Fisher the last word on this. He may have some insight as to the trees for sure.
That's what it is a quick comment. They're 35 years old. My son at 5 years old used to jump over them. So that's how I remember.
Well, thank you for that insight, sir. We appreciate that. Okay, I see no further questions. So thank you, Jen. Appreciate your comments and thank you for coming. Our next delegation is Leslie Fagan.
Can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Welcome, Leslie. You have your 7 minutes now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Leslie Fagan and I live at 189 Schneiders Road East. And Mr. Mayor and councillors and the Director of Development and the Manager of Planning, thank you for hearing with me today. So I want to echo a lot of what Jen said earlier. The biggest concern is the density of the number of units. The ask for all of these, the setback changes and the variance seems to me that the number of units being asked for in the space is too many. I was really heartened in the New Hamburg application to hear Councillor Fenning ask, what are folks looking at when they're looking at the New Hamburg development? And I'd be grateful if the same questions were asked for this development. What are we looking at? And it feels like we're looking at a lot of people in a very small space, not quite enough parking, no room for visitors. And we have a new we have Snyder's Road. By the way, I love the bike lanes, just have to say. And with the new bike lanes that it's coming up at this end of town, there's no parking on the main street. The new development behind on Brubaker of the townhouses up at the back of that. And then we have all the parking, overflow parking from 32 units. Where is all that going to go? That's a really big question for us in the neighborhood. So I just did a little bit of calculations and they're probably off financially, but if there's 32 units and they're 1 and 2 bedrooms and they're renting, let's say for roughly $1,000 to $1,500 a unit, which is what I'm kind of guessing is the kind of going rate. And that's a revenue of about $40,000 a month, and that's just under $500,000 a year to the company. And so the company's going to see a lot of revenue in a short period of time to recoup all the costs for putting this unit up. And then they're going to keep making that revenue, and we're going to be left with a 32-unit building that doesn't seem to fit where it is. It's large. It comes beyond the front property lines of where I was comfortable. It's almost feels like it's jiffy popping beyond its comfortable bounds on the property. And so, you know, that's the issue. Understand that there needs to be population density within the area, but I think the number of units is the question. There just seems to be too many for that small space. I'm just going over my notes here to see if there's anything else that I can see that I've missed. Oh yes, there is one other thing that was brought up, and that is that for outdoor space that Mr. Martin said that the parks facility that they're really close to Sradenbeck Park, which we are too. We like it. So we understand that when the folks were putting the trees in the backyard, in the new trees for the greening Wilmot, which is a great project, they indicated that there was another baseball diamond going to go into the space. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but the thought is then where do those people go if there's all baseball diamonds back there? So if all of the people, the new people that are going to come into the area and live across there are depending on going back into the park, where are they going to go where it says you can't trespass into the baseball diamonds? So that's just the thoughts on it. And I hope that that's something that the council can think about. And even though I've taken 4 minutes, I think I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Ms. Jackson, you wish to comment?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to the comment about the baseball diamond. There are no plans for a third ball diamond in that park at this time. There are some improvements planned, expanded parking potentially, but not another ball diamond.
That is great news because I can't tell you how many people use that space because we back onto it and it becomes, we make a track for cross-country skiing, and there's loads of people that are now using it. So I'm grateful that there's not a baseball diamond going there. Thank you very much. Nice news.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I see no further questions. So thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming out. So there are no more questions, and we have a recommendation before you. And the recommendation that council approves zone change application 06/21 made by Concept Development Group, Inc. /MHBC, affecting part of lot 14 concession north of Snyder's Road, being parts 1 and 2, plan 58R-19662. 1, permit multiple residential units without a commercial use on the main floor, reduce the parking ratio for apartment units from 1.5 spaces per unit to 1.2 spaces per unit, reduce the minimum rear yard setback for the building from 7.5 meters to 4.6 meters, and reduce the exterior side yard setback from the building from 6.0 meters to 5.2 meters. That is moved by Councillor Fanning, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? And none opposed. Thank you. That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is the telecommunication tower protocol review report.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. This report provides an overview of a background research on municipalities within Waterloo Region and abutting regions with respect to the process that's currently followed in reviewing telecommunication towers. Telecommunication towers are regulated by what was previously referred to as Industry Canada, now Science Economic Development Canada. And ISED provides a detailed process by which telecommunication towers are reviewed. And in part of that process outlines municipal involvement. So the easiest way to highlight the report is actually in the chart that's provided attached to the report. Staff researched regulations in the municipalities that are highlighted within that table, so Waterloo Region and Perth County and Oxford County, to look at how those municipalities engaged in the telecommunication tower review process and whether they had specific protocols. So the table on the left column shows basically the 5 ISED steps in approving a telecommunication tower process, proposal. The first step is just the background information that's required. The second step is where the municipality and neighboring property owners or the public become involved. So that's where the chart expands a little bit further and provides that information. And then the last 2 steps in the process that are highlighted there are basically the technical review and approval from Industry Canada, and then the timeline for completion of construction. So the process that the township currently follows is the ISED standard public notification process with some modifications to that. One being that Industry Canada requires a circulation public notification to neighboring property owners within 3 times the tower height. And the township requires that, but requests that proponents at minimum circulate to abutting property owners. So in some instances, that 3 times the tower height wouldn't actually reach all adjoining properties, depending on where it's located on an agricultural property. So staff request that proponents increase that notification to additional adjoining properties. And to date, proponents have agreed to do so. That has been the process. The second piece that's added to the process is a site plan control review. So telecommunication towers are exempt from site plan control, so we can't implement standard development processes in terms of development agreements. However, we do complete the same detailed review depending on the complexity and location. So if a tower is proposed in the middle of the farm, typically we wouldn't review detailed lot grading and drainage, as there's no anticipated impact from that. However, in more of a industrial location, those where there could be impacts on stormwater management controls and lot grading and drainage, those kind of criteria are reviewed through that process. And again, anything that comes out of that process are just recommendations and basically encouragement from the municipality. They aren't actually things that are set out in Industry Canada's process to require that those things be conducted. In general, our experience has been that proponents are willing to work with the municipality in the nature of things that are requested. So far to date, that hybrid process of using the standard ISED notification, enhanced to ensure neighboring property owners are notified, and then a site plan control process where agencies and internal departments review a proposal seems to fulfill all the requirements to ensure that the necessary measures are all looked at to ensure compatibility with things within the scope of the municipality. Certainly the zoning bylaw does not regulate and cannot regulate whether a tower can be located in a certain area. The ultimate approval and locations of where and when telecommunication towers can be located is up to Industry Canada. Municipal engagement is part of the process, but ultimately municipal approval is not of that of the municipality. So the overall chart highlights how different municipalities approach the situation. And as you'll see in the report, the majority of those municipalities that we sought information from within our adjoining areas do not have a specific protocol. They do follow Industry Canada's notification process. So the proponent is required to provide written notification to neighboring property owners within 3 times the tower height. In most instances, that tower height then just also requires a notification with a newspaper. And then ultimately engagement with the public. It outlines a process for how many days they have to provide notice, so 30 days to provide comments, and then there's an opportunity to respond to those comments, and all those timeframes for response and comments and responses are outlined by Industry Canada. And so that at the conclusion of that process, all of that information is then provided to the municipality, so we are able to see what comments were raised and how the comments were responded to. And then at the culmination of that, basically there's an opportunity then for us to, if there's anything outstanding, to request additional information, or if it appears that they've accommodated all concerns as much as possible, and there's no other municipal concerns in terms of access or grading issues, then the township would then provide a letter of concurrence to the proponent to provide to Industry Canada, indicating that they've fulfilled their requirements for consultation. The outcome of if there are comments that are raised through the public that they have not addressed, Industry Canada outlines kind of what's considered to be reasonable and what they have to respond to. So at the end of the day, they are required, in most instances, and the protocols attached to the report to give the specifics, but ultimately they are required to provide responses to residents' concerns for the most part, if they're fulfilled by the kind of what's considered to be reasonable. And to date, in the applications that we've seen over the last 10 years, we haven't come across one where the proponent hasn't been able to address the concerns that have been raised. So the current process that's followed and the outcome of the process ends up being that it seems to have worked sufficiently. Those municipalities that do have protocols, the changes to the process that that are seen is that in the municipalities provide the notification that the proponents are required to provide by Industry Canada, so that circulation doesn't change. But those that have protocols will circulate, the municipality will circulate the notice of the application to property owners within 3 times the tower height. So they essentially duplicate the Industry Canada process, but instead of being proponent driven, it's driven by the municipality. With the outcome still being the same, in that recommendations are then provided to Industry Canada in the final final approval. So the outcome of this report is that we've done a fairly detailed analysis and review of adjacent municipalities and neighboring regions to determine kind of what the pros and cons would be in determining, providing an independent protocol for the municipality, and reviewing the protocols and processes of these municipalities. Ultimately, the process that's currently followed by the township achieves the same outcome in staff's opinion. There are a couple areas that, certainly we felt, could benefit the process right now. We do not circulate, or don't require the proponent to circulate the ward councillor, and that was something that came up in a couple of the protocols that we had seen, and certainly we feel that could provide additional communication and engagement opportunity to ensure that the ward councillor is engaged in that process, and that's something that we would suggest would be something to kind of help with our to aid in improving our existing review process. Outside of that, staff feel that things function properly right now. The opportunities for public engagement exists, and in any scenario is regulated by Industry Canada. From that perspective, feel that we are achieving the kind of the goals and requirements from Industry Canada in our current process. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I don't disagree in principle, Mr. Martin and Mr. Okrafka. However, being that being that City of Kitchener and City of Waterloo, both, I'm more concerned about the beautification section. So it's very tiny. So my apologies for putting on, but the section 2, section 3, undertaking public. Nope, I'm still wrong. It's because it's so tiny. My apologies. The specific regulations encouraged by the municipality. That particular section is the one that I'm sort of more interested in for myself. Being that I'm abutting Waterloo on my ward. And as the cities get closer, I just feel that because you can't put a moratorium in place after an application has been done. So being that the City of Kitchener and the City of Waterloo both have that particular section with asks, I understand that the government supersedes all of that. But I think because of the cities moving closer to us on that countryside line, I think it would be a friendly idea to work with those as they work with us. To sort of have some of those specific, I'm not asking for a big change, I believe. You may disagree with me on that as far as it's whether or not it's a big change, but some of those things that are mentioned in that specific area as the cities get closer, I don't think it's a big ask to see that we kind of be friendly back to the cities if we want to ask for some shrubbery around a tower. So as they maybe get closer to the trails and there's going to maybe perhaps be a tower there, what's the harm in asking? I know that they can turn us down, but if they know that that's sort of where we're coming from, I don't see the harm in actually putting something in place, because we can't do it after an application has come forward. So for me, those particular areas are sort of an issue for me, that I think that, and I'm sure that I see Councillor Hallman has her hand up. She also abuts on the Kitchener side with a lot of farmland and Kitchener coming closer. So I think our 2 particular wards might have more of an ask because of where we sit in comparison, maybe perhaps to some of the other farmland that's within our area, where the towers tend to go.
Mr. Martin, you wish to respond to that?
Thank you, Armstrong. So I should have elaborated a little bit further when I was providing kind of the explanation of our site plan review process. So to date, the locations that we've seen haven't really been such that they would justify that kind of those kind of requirements. However, it's certainly something that we would look at if a location was such that, you know, improvements around the base, landscaping, fencing, tree planting, that sort of thing would provide benefits to adjoining landowners. If there was deemed to be a kind of a purpose for that, that's certainly something that we have the existing ability to do and would do. So we haven't to date had locations where that's really come up as something that would be a benefit. We have had one particular application in a more industrial setting that we did do you know, a more substantial review in terms of impacts on lot grading, drainage, and stormwater management, but which is a component of site plan control. But the fencing and landscaping, because of its location, again at the base, really wasn't impactful to neighboring property owners. But I just wanted to emphasize that we do have the ability to do that, and it is something that we would already contemplate if an application was to be proposed in close proximity to an urban area or residential areas where you know, the base and visual obstruction of the base would be a benefit. That certainly doesn't change the height of the structure. It's more the infrastructure at the base of the tower, and that's what the city's protocols speak to. And you know, they would more often deal with that in a more urban setting, but you know, that is something we would totally entertain and would plan to do if we had a location that would be applicable to, I guess.
So follow up through you, Mayor Armstrong.
Go ahead.
But my point being is that we don't have it written down. So it's still not an ask. And I'm just saying is what's the harm in putting an ask already on paper? I understand that you're saying that you do it, but you're here now, the person behind you, if you happen to leave us, which we don't want you to, we like you with our trails and stuff. But if there was a place where Mr. Martin's not here and somebody else doesn't have the same thought processes, we don't have anything written down. And I think that in particular, that particular section, I still think it's prudent for us to at least let developers and or farm owners or whoever's asking for the tower placement to be aware of what we think is important within our community. I just think that there's a lot of farmland, for example, where we're going to be having development, but also close to a piece of farmland. And that farm owner could just decide to put it up, and we're working on our trail system. I don't know if people really want to have a big tower close to one of our trails without something done to it. But if we don't put that ask in there to begin with, it's up to us hoping our staff remember to do that in the future without it sort of being documented. So no disrespect at all, Mr. Martin. I'm just sort of saying is I understand that you get it, but we don't have anything in place.
Through your, sorry if I could just comment briefly. So as with all of our site plan control processes, it's not a documented protocol per se. We do have internal documents that basically are checkpoints of all levels of site plan control. So similarly would be said for any kind of development in that we look at fencing, landscaping, all those criteria, the standard requirements through site plan control. It's an internal checklist for any kind of review. So we apply the same standard in a telecommunication tower process, although it's not subject to site plan control. We follow the same processes we would through any kind of development review. So I would suggest that it isn't documented in terms of a protocol that's specific to telecommunication towers. However, it does follow kind of steps that we would review through any sort of development application, whether it be industrial, residential, or in this case, a telecommunication tower. But you know, in providing documentation on those review standards as it applies to any kind of development, and communicating that through our website is probably an avenue that would be appropriate as well.
So again, just a quick follow-up through you, Mayor Armstrong. So with the city of Kitchener and the city of Waterloo having that in place, what is their procedure different than ours? Why would they have something set in place and we don't? So I know you maybe can't speak to their planning department, but I'm just wondering as to why do they have something in place that we couldn't replicate?
Through Mayor Armstrong, so the cities do have substantially more staff and resources to do sort of, so they have documents basic for all processes, right? They have development manuals that outline all aspects of different processes, whether it be building, engineering, planning, and to date, we haven't gotten there. We do have standards, some of our own, some that we refer to other municipal standards, but we do review it. We just don't document it in the same fashion as the cities do.
So again, through you, Mayor Armstrong, just the last question then. So is my ask sort of being addressed in that we do have at least behind the scenes protocols in place that would ask for shrubbery or ask for things to happen? And again, hitting on my particular ward and Councillor Hallman's ward, where the potential for us to get closer and closer together with farmland and residential, I'm thinking like, for example, Trustler and what's happening at Trustler and Bleems. It wouldn't be far off there's a large piece of farmland there for someone to put a tower up, but it's also close to the residential area. And, you know, between Mannheim Estates and the new development going up there on Trustler Road, for people to be upset that we don't have anything in place if a tower was to go there.
Sorry, I'll answer briefly. I don't know that Mr. Krafka has his hand up and well can provide additional details, but just I would say that the short answer is yes. We do have protocols and processes in place internally that ensure these sorts of things are implemented. They're just not documented in the same format as the cities, but I'll let Mr. Okrafka respond further.
Go ahead, Harold.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Councillor Gorgic. Definitely hear your request about landscaping. It's certainly something at the staff level. We do treat this as a site plan. We circulate it as a site plan. It's never been raised as an issue before, and so it hasn't been higher in the priority, but it's very easy to add it to our internal processing checklist, if you will. It doesn't necessarily require a protocol. I can tell you that we have had a tower in close proximity north of Highway 7 and 8 along Trustler/Irie Needles. It went through the protocol that we use. We received no concerns or complaints that I'm aware of or can recall from the city of Kitchener indicating that our protocol was different than theirs and they wanted it addressed any differently. Certainly the circulation allows residents to provide their input if they're within the range. There was houses there at the time. It didn't create any issue. In that location, I believe it's in the middle of a forest, so it's obviously screened. The bottom part of it is usually the complaints aren't about the bottom that we see. Usually the complaints are about the blinking light on the top, which is not something that can be addressed. But certainly we hear what you're saying in terms of adding landscaping to the checklist and ensuring appropriate landscaping would be put in place. So we can do that operationally without necessarily creating a policy. I think Mr. Martin gave a solid overview from the staff perspective, but really the protocol is whether you want the public process to happen in the council chambers or whether you want it to happen as it does now in our municipality and many municipalities where it's driven at the expense and by the proponent.
Thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. So first, thank you for this detailed report. It was a lot to digest over the weekend, and I appreciate the layers and detail that went into that. And then unpacking and processing, as you know, this is the first one that's kind of been brought to my attention as my time on council. I'm still processing. In our strategic plan, we discussed more community engagement as being one of the key components that the public identified as that. So this is one of the things that's weighing on my mind is this an opportunity to address one of the elements that was brought up by the public as being one of their key components is having, more community engagement. So how does that look? So for me, I'm thinking that would be through a policy, assuming that, none of us are members of council are guaranteed to be here. So this is our time to advocate for the community to have their voice in that process. So I'm processing that. I'm processing the aspect that Councillor Grotter brought up, which was one of the things I was thinking about too, was if something comes up, we can't stop a process. That's not within our power. And not suggesting that that's something with this specifically, but then I'm looking at if there was a policy in place that was clear, for example, the beautification, because I see that as well in these unique situations. We haven't had that yet, but planning for the future, if it was written down and it was available, then we would have that in place to articulate that this was our wishes, understanding that we don't have the final authority, but it would still show our intent. Oh, the other element that I wanted to comment on was that I reflect is through provincial directive, we've been working a lot through every, department on our efficiencies and streamlining our governance. So I see this as an opportunity for us to do that as well with other municipalities. And I'm just wondering if, like, as planners, if you've discussed that at other planning meetings, is there an opportunity for streamlining governance with this kind of a policy? Or yeah, if you can just comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Go ahead, Harold.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong to Councillor Holman. Sorry about that. I don't necessarily know that what you're suggesting would be streamlining. It would add additional layer, which may or may not be. It doesn't add consultation. Having a protocol, it just changes the location of the consultation rather than the applicant circulating the residents for their comments and providing us a summary of the comments and how they've addressed them, similar to what they have to provide to Industry Canada. It would simply mean that consultation happens in the council chambers, and that the consultation, again, it would be you would be sitting there for it, which may be beneficial. We're not commenting on whether it's beneficial or not. We're simply saying that the consultation isn't being increased. It's exactly the same process. It's just where that public meeting, if you will, occurs. From a staff perspective, the streamlining, if we would use the City of Kitchener process, then staff would be compiling lists, staff would be circulating letters, staff would be compiling reports. So it's not streamlining, it's adding process. Streamlining doesn't necessarily mean it's not the be all and end all, let's put it that way. At the same time, creating a process to give the appearance that council is making a decision on an application, when in reality, this is one that Industry Canada is making the decision. It has the potential to create conflict in the council chambers, where the public is expecting that because you invited them to hear their concerns, that you will be able to ultimately solve their concerns or refuse the application. And again, the Industry Canada process isn't set up that way. It's to hear concerns, to reasonably address the concerns, but it doesn't mean that at the end of the day, everybody's going to be happy with the end result of the process. So I'm not trying to disregard. I totally hear what you're saying about wanting to engage with the public. We feel that process is in place. It's a council decision on whether you feel it's enhanced by bringing that existing process that's the same in many municipalities into the council chambers. That's the decision you have to make.
A follow-up, Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Crawford, can you talk about, so through your conversations with other planners, so one of the things that Mr. Martin commented on was that through the process, circulating to the local council, so we're aware of these kind of coming up through. So obviously this process of this report kind of helped us learn, and even if it's not we've learned some ways of, learning some tools that we could implement here. So is from what I'm hearing is from this, we can add an internal layer of making sure that the local counselor is circulated. And is there, my other takeaway from kind of doing the comparisons, if I have this correct, is so if a piece came closer to a more settlement area, we're confident in dialogue that would kind of keep a landscape. Obviously, we can't talk about flashing lights, and I get all that, but I just mean like at the eye level, you're confident in engagement process, whether it be you or someone else in your seat leading that department or a planner meeting that department, that this would occur. I just want to make sure I'm grasping this correctly.
Through Mayor Armstrong to Councillor Hallman. Absolutely. Having said that, we have a tower that's very close to New Hamburg that was constructed, has no screening on the bottom. I don't recall that we received any complaints or concerns about how it looks. You can clearly see it from the back of homes. And again, the process worked. This exercise has been good. Telecommunications tower is, quite frankly, in planning right now, not a hot button item. It's not something that comes up very often. And quite frankly, we rarely get concerns or complaints. It's not to say that people like them, but it's definitely not something that planners are sitting around each week talking about. So the exercise of Andrew and Cameron doing the research, finding new ways to do things to improve communication, absolutely, it's been great. Adding it, quite frankly, we could add all of council rather than just the ward councillor. Maybe something that all of council wishes to see these and to monitor. But cell tower coverage, once you've got cell tower coverage, it kind of is a web that they're not duplicating it unless they need to. Historically in the township, as you're aware from New Dundee, the biggest complaint wasn't about cell towers as much as how do we get cell towers? How do we get cell coverage? My phone doesn't work in New Dundee. My phone doesn't work in Sunfish Lake or Lisbon. That's been the problem. People have welcomed cell towers because it gave them access to the systems that they felt left out. Now that the web is pretty much wide ranging and covering the township, to a certain extent, it's easier maybe to raise concerns with cell towers because people have access to the system. So, but again, communication is great. It's just not something that planners are sitting around speculating on Industry Canada process and what the options are. I don't know if that answers it, but it's the fact.
A follow-up, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That was helpful and helped me tie some loose ends there. So I do appreciate that. One more question, sorry. So through Industry Canada, if something comes through your department and they're the end all be all with decision making, if a resident does air a grievance, would they communicate through you or would they communicate to Industry Canada with that? Like what would have the most impact if something came through?
Go ahead, Harold.
Through Mayor Armstrong. Realistically, they would deal with the proponent who circulated them for the comment. If they felt so inclined, as you're aware, they can certainly contact their councillor or township staff so that it's on our radar. The ongoing process right now, I don't believe we've seen the package come back of the concerns that have been raised and how they've been addressed by the proponents. So to a certain extent, that process hasn't concluded, and until we see that package, we won't know where we are with that. But Mr. Martin may have more details on the specifics of that current application and its status. But again, it's I'll just leave it at that.
I don't mean about a specific one. I just wanted to make sure that, sorry, I just want to be clear that, I don't mean about a specific one. I just mean in general, if residents have issues with them. So I'm just saying like that piece of getting councillors involved and then having public input. I'm just taking a step back and going with advocacy. If they're needing help being heard, what is the best avenue? So you're suggesting that it's the best avenue to being heard is going to the proponent to go to Industry Canada versus at the municipal level.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong to Councillor Gorder, that's the process.
Okay.
The Industry Canada is the approval authority. They need to identify their concerns to the proponent. The proponent gets the opportunity to try to address them to the satisfaction of Industry Canada, and ultimately Industry Canada decides whether the concern is not. Involving township staff and councillor doesn't hurt, but again, it's an Industry Canada decision, not a township staff decision, and it's not a township council decision. And that's the component that's, again, it's, you're not making decisions as council, advocating, trying to help, trying to find solutions. We always try to do that, even if it's not specifically our process. But Andrew's hand is up, and I think he may have some more information.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. So just briefly with that, we, in the current process, although we do direct people to provide comments directly to the proponent, they do copy the municipality. So the proponent, when they respond to comments, they provide a copy of those responses to us. And then additionally, we receive the final compiled package of all comments that were raised and the response that are provided. So we are engaged in that process. I shouldn't say engaged, but we have the opportunity to see what's going, because to date, proponents have provided that communication to township staff in, the limited number of comments that have been raised, and so then limited comments that have been provided back. So, but ultimately, yes, the process is correctly directed to the proponent, and we are aware of what communication is happening, and to date, in our previous applications, there hasn't been a reason for us to engage further, because that process has successfully worked out, that comments have been addressed. If there was something that we felt would be worthwhile interjecting in terms of providing comments, there would be the opportunity to do that, but to date it hasn't really presented itself as being necessary. So at the end of the process, culmination of it, we see all the communication, but we do see the kind of intermediary steps as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fanning, you had your hand up for a long time. Did you're good? Okay, Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just appreciate the depth and detail in the staff report, and just sort of as a final takeaway for me anyway, the area of jurisdiction lies with the federal government. I appreciate if there could be enhanced copying in of ward councillors and things like that, but understanding that it's an area of federal jurisdiction, I think, is important. And I think as well, Mr. O'Krafko, the point that was in my head as well was, we live in a largely underserviced, I shouldn't say largely underserviced area. We live in a township that has pockets of underserviced areas. And certainly, the general response or the general comments around cell towers are, like you mentioned, Mr. O'Krafka, hey, I'd like a better signal here. And we know that part of the solution to that, is cell towers that service people and, allow better connections via their cell networks, et cetera. So look forward to that occurring.
Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm thankful for the conversation. So appreciate both Mr. O'Krafka and Mr. Martin's comments. And I'm a little bit more behind the report that you presented, and I'm thankful for that. I believe because of the circumstances with regards to it being a federal issue, involving our staff in any more situations seems to be counterintuitive and just extra more work. However, I do appreciate that Mr. Martin said that we could be a little bit more checklists behind the scenes, so to speak, with regards to the procedures for an application process. I think that would be helpful. And then the further communication with councillors, and perhaps maybe because sometimes where we are located within it, perhaps for my own personal, I think to all council would be prudent. Because sometimes we run into people on the street. It would be kind of nice to know if someone had an issue. So that would be my takeaway. And I appreciate, again, the time and energy for producing this report.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more towers as the government has committed $4.5 billion over up to 2025, by 2025, to improving communications throughout the entire province. So I'm sure we will see more towers go up. Maybe somebody will design one that's pretty. Okay. So the recommendation that report DS 2021-034 be received for information. That is moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fenning. Councillor Fenning, you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong, actually to you, about the pretty towers. I would like to note that the towers that are made to look artificially like a tree or such are actually disastrous for the environment because of the amount of plastic that they shed. If you've ever stood under one of those and you see the plastics just blowing around on the ground under them, it's awful. So it might not be beautiful, but let's just stick with a tower that's a tower.
Well, I'm sure that in these days we don't have to make plastic pretty. They can come up with other ways of doing it. So with the great minds that are in the region of Waterloo, I'm sure somebody will dream something up. Okay, so our next item is.
You have to ask for vote, sir.
What's that? Oh, all in favor of that? That's everybody. Thank you. It's carried. So the next report is on Metrolinx.
This report, as I'm sure you have read, deals with Metrolinx and Go Transit. The township has a fairly long history in trying to attract Go and Metrolinx to the Township of Wilmot. 2007, Metrolinx began an EA looking at all-day two-way Go to Kitchener and what that would require with system and wides. As you may recall, Baden, Nassiga Road was the edge of the study area. Township staff at that time and council reviewed it and decided that it was a good fit for the township, and we actively and fairly vocally supported both the plans for all-day two-way Go and also the plans for an overnight facility at Nassiga Road with the inclusion of a station. And we were obviously fairly pleased with the end result of that EA in 2009, which did identify that the preferred alternative would include overnight facility for the trains and a station in Baden. After a recent foray for a number of years into high-speed rail for Ontario and concepts of a new high-speed corridor to London, from London to Kitchener, which would not have included stops in St. Mary's or Stratford or even Wilmot, the province seems to have turned its focus back to Metrolinx, and for that, from a staff perspective, certainly I see it as a benefit and a potential. The picture on the screen is a blurry picture. It's a picture taken at the New Hamburg crossing on Waterloo Street, and it's blurry because the train doesn't stop here. And if you were listening to the news today, maybe that's the solution to the problem they're having with ridership currently from London to Kitchener. There's not enough people on the train. Well, maybe it needs to stop one more time between Baden and New Hamburg for a number of reasons. One, to give direct access to our residents and the residents to the north in Wellesley, the residents to the south in Blandford, Blenheim, and even the west side of Kitchener, quite frankly. Reality is high speed, or rather not high speed, higher order transit. It's designed to minimize the use of automobiles, but reasonably, I would expect that if someone's taking to go from the west side of Kitchener, they're probably going to drive downtown to the station. They can drive to Wilmot a lot faster and probably cheaper with less stress than navigating through the stoplights of Kitchener to get downtown to the station. So from that perspective, we think that a station at Nassiga Road in that vicinity, either on the New Hamburg side or the Baden side, makes a lot of sense. St. Mary's has a population of about 7,200 people. They have a station, so that's obviously a benefit. But we've got about 14,000 in the urban area of Baden and New Hamburg combined. Plan to grow it to about 20,000 under the 2019 official plan, and long-term potential for significantly greater population. Transit, as we discussed with the expansion of Route 77, transit drives density and density drives transit. So it's a symbiotic relationship to a certain extent. If we can attract a Metrolinx station, we can probably attract higher density development, which supports the visions for our community, maintaining, the 15-minute type neighborhood where you can live, work, and play all in short order. The map attached to the report highlights the sort of anchors of that corridor between Baden and New Hamburg and speaks a bit to the MCR process. The easterly anchor obviously is existing Baden. The westerly anchor is New Hamburg. To the north, you have Waterloo Oxford Secondary School, and to the south, you have the employment lands and also the Wilmot Recreation Complex. So well suited long term. Affordable housing is a big subject, obviously, these days. Inclusionary zoning, which was added to the Planning Act and the toolbox for planners, limits itself to major transit station areas. We don't have a major transit station area, so the ability to force the creation of affordable housing is limited. However, if we were successful in attracting Metrolinx or finding a way to have Metrolinx stop, it leads to that next discussion on then designating as a major transit station area and opening that toolbox of inclusionary zoning and other tools that would benefit the long-term growth of this community. The report does highlight, has some pictures of the history of transit and trains in Wilmot as being very important. In the 1850s, obviously, the Grand Trunk Railway was extended from Berlin at the time to Petersburg, then to Baden, and to New Hamburg and beyond. That was an important part of the history of the township. And from a long-term planning perspective, we see that the potential to access this network is very important to the future of the township as well. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councillor Gordick.
Thank you for this report through you, Mayor Armstrong. Really excited to see this. I know that it was a big thing when I first moved to Wilmot, when we talked about it and being involved with the Board of Trade and some of the conversations with the consultation at the Baden near the Nafziger depot or potential depot. But I just wanted to sort of add a little bit of a personal note is that we've investigated taking the train to Toronto and just recently. And while we can get there fairly decently with maybe in about 2 to 3 hours from New Hamburg, the trip home was going to be over 8 hours. So it kind of really doesn't leave you a lot of time to turn around and maybe go for a theater show or anything else that you maybe want to just sort of get out of the Waterloo region for a little bit of a break. An 8-hour return trip journey on public transport is quite a jaunt. And then you wouldn't be able to actually get back to New Hamburg because there would be no public service. So you'd be sort of stuck in Kitchener-Waterloo, which maybe then adds to the extra cost of trying to go someplace. So this is quite an exciting endeavor, and I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes. So thanks for that.
Mr. Crafty, you wanted to respond to that?
Of course, it's about trains. Through you, Mayor Armstrong and Councillor Gordick, I agree and totally agree with what you're saying. The usage drives the service and the service drives the usage. But I thought I would add another note. My daughter, who attends the University of Toronto and lives downtown Toronto, came home for the Christmas season, which was great. And she came home on the GO train, which personally, I'd rather drive into Kitchener if I have to. I'd rather drive to Nafziger Road, ideally, to pick her up, but versus driving 4 hours into the city, which I detest, and back out. For $15, she was able to come home for the holidays. So certainly the value of GO service is there, and finding ways to improve accessibility will address the concerns that were raised on the radio today that currently only 32 people on average a day are riding the train from London, which they pointed out was about half of a bus load. So at $2.5 million a year for the 2-year pilot project, it's probably going to be an expensive pilot unless we can find ways to help Metrolinx out by giving them additional customers. And I think that's really the focus of this report, is to offer our assistance to Metrolinx with their service.
Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I would I'm delighted to support this. I think it's fantastic. And, if there's any other way I can support other than, voting in favor of this recommendation, I'd be happy to do it. Anecdotally, I'll say that, you know, we have on the farm here, we have over 100 staff, and many of them do live locally, and many of them have connection to Toronto and want to travel into Toronto, and many of them also do not like to drive into Toronto. So this would, you know, I can guarantee there would be some ridership.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Just wanted to comment that I did receive an email from Stonecroft residents who were intrigued by this for medical appointments, that the quality of care that they require for different treatments going to the city, and as more doctors' offices, as we're experiencing locally, are joining forces together, and we're getting more and more specialized hospitals that are focusing on one area of expertise. And while it is improving the healthcare in the province, it is making it more difficult for people to get to those specialized hospitals. So this provides an opportunity for them to make an appointment and get back home in a more efficient time. So yeah, there's lots of layers to look at supporting this.
Okay, thank you. So the recommendation is that report DS 2021-030 be received for information, and that staff be directed to initiate discussions with Metrolinx to discuss both short-term and long-term opportunities for the residents of Township of Wilmot to conveniently access GO train service, ideally within the future development corridor between Baden and New Hamburg. And that is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is the third ice pad location study. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Council will recall on November 8th that approval of the PFRS 2021-018 report, staff report regarding the preliminary findings. And this report outlined the consultation work that Monteith Brown did with our user groups for the arenas. And it included a recommendation that staff be directed to initiate a public consultation process to seek comments on the recommended location of the Wilmot Rec Complex for the third ice pad site. So this report this evening is to report back to council on the results of that. Staff initiated an online public survey Friday, November the 12th, that was open for 2 weeks. And there were 362 responses. And that information was collated by staff and Monteith Brown. 92% of the respondents were residents of Wilmot Township, and 99% of the respondents were submitted by individuals who indicated that they currently attend and utilize the WRC, with strong representation from our minor sport participants and families. So through the analysis of the comments regarding the recommended location of the third ice pad, 47% indicated that the WRC was their preferred choice. 44% indicated that it didn't matter to them as long as another ice pad was built. 5% indicated that they would prefer the New Hamburg Community Center to be reopened as a rink. And then there were a few other anecdotal comments with respect to not needing a rink, which is anticipated when you do this kind of public consultation. So based on the results of this survey and the recommendations presented to council by Monteith Brown on November 8th, this report is now seeking approval for staff to direct Monteith Brown to develop a conceptual design and high-level cost estimate to construct a third rink at some point in the future at the WRC location. So I'm happy to take any questions that council may have at this point, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Any questions or comments? Councillor Holman.
Thank you, through the mayor. Ms. Jackson, I have had a couple of emails asking what the realistic long-term projection is of skates being tied on children and them going to be on a third rink. And I said maybe Mr. Gerber could speak to the fact of how the arena process went for the last one, because I don't believe it was like a year or 2 years. It was certainly not an overnight journey. So just for the reality of the listening ears this evening, can you comment on that?
Thank you, Councillor Holman, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I mean, it really depends on council's priorities at budget time. So a rink could be designed and delivered in a couple of years. I see Mr. Kelly has turned his camera on as well and may have some comments, but it could be turned around in a couple of years, but it will depend on the priorities and on the funding availability. So really difficult to estimate at this time. From a design perspective, this would be relatively simple design, but there would be some rerouting of entrance, access, et cetera, to put it in this location. And I think that when Monteith Brown is back in front of council in the new year, that they would be able to provide a little bit more input into that as well. Sorry, that wasn't a very clear answer.
Mr. Kelly, did you wish to comment?
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. I think Ms. Jackson covered it pretty well, both touching on the priority setting for council. We have a number of significant capital investments that are proposed or in the process of coming forward. We have a 10-year capital forecast that has to manage the timing for a number of competing projects, I would say. So I know there's been some in-depth conversations with our new CAO, Ms. Chambers, about some priority setting that we need to have from council, and a lot of those discussions I think will flow through this budget process coming up, which kicks off next Monday. So I'm glad this council is cognizant of that, and your question, Councillor Holman, recognizing putting that on the floor, that it's not something we can just flip out next year. I appreciate you asking that question.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, so the recommendation that the third ice pad public consultation summary report be received, and further that staff be directed to proceed with a conceptual design and order of magnitude costing for a third ice pad at the Wilmot Recreation Complex site as recommended by the consultants Monteith Brown Planning Consultants Limited and supported by public consultation. And further that staff be directed to present a conceptual design and order of magnitude costing to council in Q1 of 2022. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fenning, and all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. So next item is the Fire Services Report number 2021-06. Chief, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Through the chair, I'd like to present council the updated IMS version of the emergency management report, along with all appendices that are companion documents. Just wanted to give a quick high-level overview of this document. First of all, it's an integral document to the overall emergency plan to the township. It gives us a benchmark with the incident management system built into it to move forward each year with improvements to the plan that we would then bring back to council each and every year. And that is done through the program committee. The program committee meets each year to review the existing plan and future plans, any areas of improvement, and then we can report those progresses back to council each year. This will be a moving forward target for us. That was not done in the past. And it's proposed that we do that from now on. So council is completely transparent with this process going forward. I also wanted to throw in, I wanted to thank our administrative assistant, Donna Erb. She's been trained to be a CEMC, and she was a very much an integral part of this process this year and did a tremendous amount of work on the plan with the with me overseeing it. So it's I really was grateful for her input on this. So it's important that council understands that A, this is a legislative requirement, and B, that it's a living document. It'll continue to move forward on an annual basis with the inclusion of our program committee at the operations level. The purpose of the emergency plan is that it gives an overview of emergencies such as a tornado, a flooding event, large scale events, not like a single family structure fire. We don't activate our EOC for an emergency of that nature. It's meant for larger emergencies that require more coordination. It could require the region, I should say, CEMC to be involved, or possibly resources from those areas, and we may have to tap into. So it's a cascading plan. One municipality has a problem. If it impacts two, then we work together. Two or more, then the region is automatically brought into the plan, and so on. And it just grows and grows and grows, such as the pandemic, which is a full provincial emergency, and all of the various layers that are within that. So it works very well. The inclusion of the IMS system was very important for us to train our staff to understand the IMS process. It is in the provincial doctrine that IMS is incorporated into all emergency plans. To my understanding, we're the last municipality to bring IMS on board into our plan. So I felt it very important and very timely to get this done this year. Excuse me. All the components of the management plan, or the emergency management plan, also include things like the HIRA, which is our hazard index ratings. So we go through a template that the province provides us, and it has a number of steps that we have to go through to determine what level of risk each category has. That's very time consuming, and we work through all of that. Those go back to the program committee then for review, and then that would be used as our marching orders, so to speak, on the emergency plan. There's fan out lists, there's critical infrastructure that we look at, the alerting system to both the public and to staff, how the EOC operates, how the program committee is structured, all of those various components. So it's quite comprehensive. So I'll leave it at that for now. That if council has any questions, I'm here to answer those questions for you. Thank you.
Any questions of the chief? Seeing none. Obviously a job well done. Thank you. So the recommendation is that council approve the updated emergency response bylaw, and further that council adopts both the new IMS emergency response plan and the emergency management program committee terms of reference attached. That is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Fanning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is correspondence, and recommendation that correspondence item number 13.1 be received for information. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, seconded by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is bylaws, and the recommendation that bylaw numbers 2021-57 and 2021-58 be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. And that is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick, all in favor? That is carried. There any notice of motions? Seeing none. Announcements. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, I have two announcements. The first one is this coming Saturday, December the 11th at 7 o'clock. The Wilmot Terry Fox Run will be presenting an online dramatic reading of A Christmas Carol. The show will be based on an abridged version of Charles Dickens' classic novel with some seasonal music. Thank you to Trinity Lutheran Church for offering the use of its beautiful chapel, all the talented performers who donated their services, to Trinity's Rick Ritz for recording the video of the show, and most of all to Lisa Hagan for putting the whole thing together. We're asking viewers to enter into the spirit of the season by giving a donation, with all the money raised going to the Terry Fox Foundation for Cancer Research. You can watch the show and make a donation at facebook.com/Wilmot Terry Fox Run. And my second announcement. December 6, 1989 is a dark day in Canadian history. 32 years ago today, 14 women, most of them engineering students, were murdered in the Montreal Massacre. As he shot them, their killer said, "You're all a bunch of feminists. I hate feminists." The anniversary of this tragedy is commemorated as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. I was honored to be invited by Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region to be part of their Say Their Names video project. 14 women from across the region each said the name of one of the December 6th victims, and the compiled video was shared on social media today as an act of remembrance and appreciation of the women whose lives were lost. In Ontario, there was a 53% increase this year in the number of women who were killed by men compared to last year. By July 2021, the number of femicides in Ontario has already surpassed the total number of femicides that occurred the previous year. 36% of the victims were 55 years of age or older. Thank you to the Women's Crisis Services and closer to home to the Wilmot Family Resource Centre for the vital work they do to prevent violence against women. I also thanks to my council colleagues for recognizing this day for wearing purple. And now I believe Carl, our IT gentleman, is going to be showing the video for our audience to watch. Please.
Anne-Marie Edward, chemical engineering student.
Hélène Colgan, mechanical engineering student.
Nathalie Croteau, mechanical engineering student.
Barbara Daniel, medical engineering student.
Maud Javiernek, materials engineering student.
Maryse Lagonière, budget clerk in the École Polytechnique's finance department.
Maurice Leclerc, materials engineering student.
Anne-Marie Lemay, mechanical engineering student.
Sonia Palache, mechanical engineering student.
Michelle Richard, materials engineering student.
Annie St. Arnaud, mechanical engineering student.
Barbara Kluznik-Vidajovic, nursing student.
Annie Turcott, materials engineering student.
Genevieve Bergeron, civil engineering student.
Thank you, Councillor Gordick. Do you have any follow-up to, no? Okay. Councillor Hallman?
Thank you through the mayor. I did just want to also acknowledge today with those comments. One thing that every male can do is reflect more deeply on your comments to women and those that identify as women. And understanding that feminism just means equality. It means equity. It means that women deserve the same as people with white male privilege have had, and people with male privilege have had. And we need to pause. And I'm thankful when I rode through the township today that I saw the flags at half mast acknowledging the lives lost of these women who were simply murdered for wanting equity, for being women in an environment that was not embracing them for who they were. So there are things that we can all do together for allyship, for equity, for women's rights. I did also want to thank the community so deeply for attending Saturday in New Dundee. It was lovely to see the smiles on kids' faces, getting to see Santa and Mrs. Claus again. It brought so much joy to my heart. It brought so much joy to the kids' hearts to have that interaction in a safe way. So I am so grateful for the New Dundee Optimist for working with us. I'm so grateful for all the volunteers, as National Volunteer Day was yesterday, who continue to find ways to navigate and find ways to still participate that way. I also wanted to comment that this coming Friday, the New Dundee Optimist have a dinner. And it is really great that they have tickets available still. And it's a fundraiser for them to put on events for the community, being the kids events like the Easter event that they have and things like that. So please consider, if you have time in your schedule and you've been double vaccinated, that you can attend that event. I had one more thing. Where did it go? Oh, yes. We handed out flyers in New Dundee for looking for a crossing guard. The community is still searching for a crossing guard. So if you are looking to have some part-time employment within New Dundee, please consider putting your name forward for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Mayor Armstrong and I took part in the Baden Mini Santa Claus Parade on Saturday. Was put on by the Baden Optimists and the Baden Chamber of Commerce, and they collected a lot of food for the food bank, which is in need right now, so I'm very proud of them. And also a big thanks to the Baden Chamber of Commerce for the amazing light display they've got in downtown Baden now. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it's pretty outstanding. But, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. And I want to thank Councillor Gordick for sharing that video tonight. The violence against women happens every day in our communities. It happens to children who are barely out of diapers. It happens at every age. And we're all here wearing purple tonight in solidarity and to remember the women who were murdered. But it takes a community doing more than wearing a color. It takes each and every one of us speaking up, and especially the men in our lives speaking up when they hear something that isn't right, not turning away, not feeling awkward, and not thinking somebody else will step in and that it's not their job. It's our job, every one of us, because if we don't stop it, there's going to be another generation that goes through what many of us already have. And so I'm asking each and every person to think about how they can be an ally and how they can reach out and recognize and speak up for the women around you. One other thing, it's December, and for many of us, that means Christmas celebrations. Some people that is Hanukkah and various other seasonal celebrations. And whatever your culture is, whatever your family culture is, whatever your beliefs are, there are many events around this time of year that celebrate family, belonging, community, and togetherness. And I want to say to families like the families of those 14 women that it can be a lot of pressure. And I know for my family what it's meant. 3.5 years ago when our son died, and Christmas has not been the same. So if you know somebody who has lost someone close to them, make sure that you give them space if they need it. Encourage them to join if they're up for it, and understand that they're not going to respond normally, because it can be a really hard time.
Thank you. Had something further, Councillor Hallman?
Thank you, through the mayor. Councillor Fanning, thank you for those beautiful words. Councillor Fisher, I wanted to just comment on that light display in Baden. I'm not sure what your involvement with that was, but it's been so greatly appreciated, and I hear about it every day from the kids coming home from school. So it has lit up that community, and it is just so beautiful. So if you're involved in that, please pass on my thanks, and please accept my thanks. It's been absolutely beautiful to see.
Okay, thank you. So to follow up with the video that was shown, we should hope that sooner than later that everyone gets involved in the Moosehide campaign, which is up there, and we have to, gentlemen, just need to get involved. And if everyone is involved, then that'll put an end to that violence. So let's hope that that grows. Thank you. And I've been asked on behalf of the regional chair to advise that the Elf on the Shelf has received both of his shots. So he is double vaccinated, and everybody should be aware of that, so that he is safe to be in your house, but just beware of the trickster. And I see no other announcements. And I do appreciate all the beautiful decorations and all the hard work that all the volunteers have done in New Hamburg and Baden and New Dundee and everywhere with the beautification and the celebration of the season. So heartfelt thanks to everybody who's been out there working very hard. And that brings us to our confirmatory, whoops. We have a couple of items coming out of closed session. Does everybody have copies of these?
No, sir, I can put it on the screen.
You're going to bring them up? Okay, so there's two items coming from the our closed session. And the first is the Brubaker Street land donation. And the clerk is going to try and bring up the recommendation. As you can see, and we'll give everybody a moment to read it. Make sure that's all correct. Everybody give us maybe a thumbs up once you've had a chance to look at it. So has everybody had a chance to read it and okay it? All righty. Councillor Fisher, do you have a comment, or is that just you're waving to say you've read it?
I'm just saying I read it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. And the second item is the proposed donation of lands from Tri-County Mennonite Homes. And do the same routine. Everybody have a chance to look at it. And give us a thumbs up once you're finished. 1, 2. Three, 4, and 5. Everybody's done that. Okay, so we need a mover and a seconder. That'll be moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fanning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next item we have is the confirmatory bylaw. Recommendation that bylaw number 2021-59 be introduced, read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Fanning, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And last recommendation that we do now, adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. Well, nobody's rushing here. What's going on? Councillor Fanning, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? Thank you. And that's it for this evening. So every